To start, welcome everybody. Um, Welcome to the CIC. It's a vibrant venue. So my name is Luis Olmos. I am the Vice President of Ecusa Boston, and I'm currently a Senior Scientist at Boston University. I would like to start thanking our sponsors for supporting this event. So we have on one hand Pico Law, who is the one who's giving the talk today, Javier Pico. He's been a great support for Ecusa Boston. And also we'd like to start thanking also the Ministry of Employment and Social Security from Spain, which is also supporting a lot of programs that we are developing here in the United States. And of course, the CIC for hosting the event. So before actually introducing the speaker, Javier Pico, I don't know why it's, hold on. I guess I'm the last one, sorry. I would like to briefly talk about Ecusa, who we are and what we do, so you guys can have a perspective. Ecusa stands for Spanish Scientists in the US. And so we are a non-profit organization that was founded only 2 years ago, but we already have more than 800 members, and we are in 5 different locations in this country. Besides Boston, we are in DC, we are in New York, California, and Midwest. So one of the things that I like about Ecusa is that while the scientists form the majority of the association, we also have high diversity with other professionals, including engineers, computer experts, or journalists, which makes a very dynamic and very interesting environment to work with. So Ecusa mission is based on 3 main initiatives, which are professional development and networking, science outreach, and education. And it's around these 3 initiatives where specific programs are developed between the professional members of Ecusa. It's like these 3 initiatives acting as a glue, like actually building up an extensive and I would say unprecedented network of Spaniards in this country. So I'm going to give you very briefly some examples of programs and activities that we do in each one of these initiatives. So in education, this was actually very recent. 2 days ago, Ecusa Boston had the opportunity to participate in the Cambridge Science Festival, which brings hundreds of kids to learn something new about science. So we were there, we had a booth, we had microscopes, we had a software program to design bridges, we have many different things, and it was a very rewarding experience. I'd like to mention that we also have a program called Ecusa en las Escuelas, which professional members of Ecusa teach on-hands workshops at bilingual schools here in Boston and Cambridge. This is also a very rewarding experience. And actually, very recently, the Spanish Foundation of Science and Technology made a press release about the important work we were doing on this program. So what about science outreach? So here in Boston, we are actually, we have a program called Ecusa Science Nights, and it's very simple. Basically, we are selecting different topics that are important to society. So we organize the event, we bring the speaker or a panel, and we talk about, like I said, different things. So here are examples that are ranging from maybe call about materials and the future of electronics, how to study evolution using invertebrates, allergies, all things like that. You can actually we have on YouTube, we have a channel where you can actually check them out, all of them. What about professional development and networking? We have many, many programs ongoing in this very broad initiative. I'm going to just mention briefly some of them, like we have career-related workshops, we have mentoring programs, we have social programs as networking, Ciencia Un Jamón, where we just social, we meet at a bar. We are very, also we like that. And also, for example, the welcome package, which is basically designed to accelerate and facilitate the integration of Spaniards that come to the US or are actually currently working here. And actually, this talk today is one of the activities that this program is actually putting in place. I also would like to take the opportunity to announce an upcoming workshop, career-related, that we're going to have on June 16th. It's going to be about leadership, and This is Juan Rivera. He's an assistant professor at Loyola University. He will come to Boston and we give this a very exciting talk. So if you're interested, please join us. And finally, I just would like to take the opportunity to let you know that you're interested in, you want to get involved in Ecusa, in some of these main initiatives, you're interested in education, professional development, or science outreach. Please, I encourage you to explore our website, to talk to us. The Ecusa Boston team is going to be here after in the reception that we're going to have. You can also become an associate member, which is free, and you're going to be receiving an electronic newsletter every other week, where we're going to have all the information about activities and events that are happening in Ecusa. We also have a job opportunity section as well. If you're going to go a step farther, you can actually become a full member, where we have actually important benefits for the people. For example, Pico Law actually is giving a discount, a 5% discount on any non-immigrant or visa-related services. We have all the partnerships with other companies, and also I would like to highlight these two programs that we have, mainly focusing on promoting your own research and work and enhancing you as a professional. These are actually two programs that there are some full members that are already benefiting from. So it's only $30 a year, and you can also be part of the committee and eventually be part of the board of directors. So that's pretty much it, very briefly. So thank you, and I would like to introduce now Javier Pico. He was born in Madrid, but he's been here for many, many years in Boston. He just told me a little secret before, like 15 minutes ago, that he came to Boston to study music at Berkeley. So he used to like rock. So, but then he realized that it wasn't maybe his field or something. He changed, he studied law, and he actually started his own firm. So right now, today, he has very extensive experience about non-immigrant visas, about permanent residencies, about how to become actually an entrepreneur in Boston. So I hope you guys enjoy the talk today. Thank you for coming. And Javier, whenever you want. All right. Aquí. No, aquí. Vale.
Gracias. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. It's my pleasure to be here with you tonight, and I want to thank, in particular, Ecusa. I'm very proud to be a sponsor of this organization, which does so many good things for the Spanish scientific community here in Boston and the United States. Recently, I was speaking with a branch in San Francisco. They're doing the same type of great work out there, and I'm very pleased to be associated with Ecusa. Today is Marathon Day, and what we're going to do is have a marathon of visa information. We have between half an hour to 45 minutes to an hour to speak, and I'm going to cover the materials related to visas, more directed towards business and people that are coming to work here in the United States. Like I was speaking with people before, immigration is a very broad field, and it's impossible to cover everything in one session. Actually, one of the visas alone would cover, if I were to talk about it in detail, would cover the entire time we have today, and we wouldn't even complete it. So today is a very cursory approach to the general visa layout, both for green cards, which are permanent visas, and non-immigrant visas, which are work visas and temporary visas. I think the best thing, there's probably going to be a lot of questions. Best thing is to keep the questions to the end so that we can flow through all of this information. Okay. This is the overview of what we're going to talk about today. Explain to you how the U.S. immigration system works. Basically, there's two parts to it. One is controlled by USCIS, Customs and Immigration Service. They control everything that happens within the United States. Then there's also the United States Department of State, which does the same work but outside of the United States. So if you're processing any type of visa and you're in Spain, for example, or Europe or Australia, you would work with Department of State. If you're working inside the United States, you would work with USCIS. There's two types of visas, basically. Non-immigrant visas, which are what we spoke of before, temporary visas for a very specific purpose. And then there's immigrant visas, which are also known as green cards. Those are the permission that are granted to certain people to live and work permanently in the United States. And within those categories, there's different subgroups. And the main groups, the ones we're going to talk about today, there's more categories than this, but they're not really relevant to today's conversation. But what we're going to talk about today is visas based on family relationships, visas based on employment relationships, and what's called the visa lottery, which is diversity visas. And then at the very end, if we have time, I'm going to speak briefly about becoming a corporate entity in Massachusetts. And I'll touch very lightly on that, depending on how much time we have. Okay, let's start with non-immigrant visas. Like I said, these are visas. It's a permission to come into the United States for a limited period of time and for a very specific purpose. Most of them are obtained at the U.S. consulates. Some of them, you have to begin the actual petition with USCIS in the United States, and once the visa is approved, they transfer it to the consulate for an interview. But the majority of them are done at the consulates. If your visa is granted, that is not the end of the situation. Once you come into the United States, you have to work with the people at the airport, which are called Customs and Border Patrol. That is a law enforcement branch of USCIS and Homeland Security, which controls who actually gets in. So even though you have a granted visa in your passport, you have everything ready to come in, the people at the airport, they have absolute discretion to allow you to come in and under the circumstance that they determine is appropriate. So this means that even though everything's approved, you get your visa in Germany, the person here at Logan can deny you entry, can send you back, he can cancel your visa, or he can determine how long you can stay. For example, if your visa in the consulate is granted for 3 years, the person at the airport, Customs, can grant you 3 months or 1 year. Okay, so you have to be ready for that second interview, just like the first one. And once you're inside, if you have a problem which makes you inadmissible, then there's another bureau, it's called ICE, which means Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Those are the people that, it's the immigration police that are in charge of arresting people, detaining them, and sending them back to their country if you get deported. We don't want to deal with them, but if we have to, we have a lot of experience with that as well. Visa requirements. The consulates have to work with laws enacted by Congress, and generally we have uniform requirements for all types of visas. However, the interesting thing is that each consulate has the ability to modify things in relation to what they determine necessary. So, for example, the consulate in Frankfurt is going to have different requirements than the one in Mexico City. And although you may qualify for the visa, if you don't meet all the requirements of the particular consulate that you're working with, you're not going to get the visa. So you need to, in addition to meeting all the general requirements, you need to go to the website for the consulate in particular that you're working with and find out exactly what they need as far as documentation, time period. And one thing that people always ask me is, well, I qualify for this visa, but in Madrid it's a problem. Can I have my interview in Montreal, for example, which is more friendly to these types of visas? Again, you have to look at the website for the consulate, because some consulates allow people to receive the interview from a third country, and some don't. So not necessarily can you always transfer. Sometimes you're stuck with the one that you have, and you have to work with that one. So in addition to meeting the requirements, the general government requirements, and the requirements of that particular consulate, you cannot be inadmissible. Inadmissible is a term used by immigration, which basically says that there's something in your background that prevents you, even if you qualify for the visa, prevents you from entering the United States. And this can be anything from criminal history, visa fraud, a denial. Sometimes you can be denied at the border for no apparent reason except that the person doesn't like you. And he thinks there's something wrong, but like I said, they have absolute discretion. So he can deny your visa, and that will appear in the system. And then you'll go for another visa, and just by virtue of the fact that someone has a message there. By virtue of the fact that that officer wrote something negative in your record, that's going to raise suspicions at the consulate for your interview. The person at the consulate has no idea what this is, but they might just deny you based on that alone. And there's no arguing. We can bring this up to the Department of State in Washington if you have a problem, but they like to always support their consular officers. So it's a little problematic. So you cannot have prior denials. If you do, it's not an absolute inadmissibility reason, but it can be problematic. Or a visa revocation, that's after you've been granted a visa and it's revoked for some reason. Overstays are a major problem. Overstays means if you spent at least 1 day in the United States out of status. So a lot of people come in with a visa, and when that visa expires, you are allowed to stay for a period of time. Depending on the visa, sometimes it's 10 days, sometimes it's 30 days, sometimes it's longer. But some people stay an extra day. That extra day can mean that you may never be able to come back into the United States legally. That's an overstay. There's some, when you're looking for a permanent green card, there's some waivers and pardons that are available to overcome these things, but generally for non-immigrant visas, if you've spent 1 day out of status in the United States, it's almost your death sentence. It's very hard to overcome that. Immigration violations, fraud, anything of that nature will make you inadmissible. So, as I said, we're going to concentrate on the visas most used by people that are coming to study or work in the United States or open a business. And we're going to talk about Bs, Es, H-1Bs, Js, Ls, and Os. And then we'll talk about green cards down the road. Okay, the B1 visa. This is also known as the business visa or visa for tourism, and it's one of the easiest ones to obtain. Some countries have the ESTA program, like Spain, and some don't, and they have to get a B1 visa. If for some reason you have a problem with your ESTA, for example, we're doing an e-visa for a person now who was coming with ESTA from Canada, and the person at the border denied his entry with ESTA because he felt the person did not have sufficient ties with Canada. He was in the process of becoming a permanent resident of Canada. So he denied entry, that appears in the system. That person can never get an ESTA entrance again. He has to request a B1 visa if he's going to come in for business purposes. So basically, for ESTA, you cannot have any problems whatsoever, or you have to go for an interview with a B1 visa. So these are used a lot by people that are coming in for commercial transactions to complete a sale or purchase of a business. It cannot be used for employment, and this is used a lot for employment when people do not want to wait for the process of completing the visa. They use these because this visa, you can generally get an appointment for this visa in a matter of weeks, as opposed to the other types of business visas, which take sometimes weeks and months to obtain. So if you come in, you can use this for business, but you have to be employed in your foreign country, you have to be paid in your foreign country, and you need to come in just to carry out transactions, like, for example, negotiations, you're involved in litigation, consulting work, conferences, conventions, meetings, all these types of activities. For some of the visas that we're going to talk about in a minute, you need to have a U.S. subsidiary company, and people come in with this visa to set up the company first, and then they go back to their country to complete the long-term visa. There is a requirement for these visas of non-immigrant intent. That means that you have to show substantial ties with your country, ties like residence, either you own a house, you rent a house, you have a business, insurance, you pay bills. You need to show these things, or you could be denied the visa. You cannot receive any type of payment here. Even if you're coming to give a presentation or a speech, a paid speech, it has to be paid in your country, okay? And your principal place of business is in your country. Let's see if I can get rid of this thing. Yeah. All right. The next visa is the B2 visa, which is very similar to the business visa, but this is for social purposes, tourism, families, weddings, social things. A lot of people use it for healthcare. They have the same requirements as the B1 visa, but the purpose is these things. The entry for the B1 and B2, the amount of time that they allow you to come in, usually when they grant these visas, they're good for 10 years. So you don't have to go back to the consulate for 10 years. You can use this visa multiple times. And the person at the airport is the one that's going to determine how much time you're allowed to come in on that particular trip. They don't like to give more time than what is necessary for your particular purpose. So when you come in with these visas, you need to have documentation as to what you're going to do. If you're going to be at a training session for 6 weeks, you need to have all that documentation, and they'll probably give you 8 weeks, so you have a little bit of leeway. But if you're coming in to go to Disney World, you're probably going to get a month, okay? And the most, and when I'm talking about what they give you is, I'm talking about what's called the I-94, which is, it used to be a document that they would stamp on your passport. Now it's electronic. And that document is issued by Customs and Border Patrol, and that determines how much time you can be in the United States under that particular visa. It used to be that before you landed in the United States, you would fill out these cards on the airplane. Now you do it electronically. So that's the I-94. There's another message. Okay, so those are the B1s and B2s. Now we're getting into the E-visas. These are visas based on bilateral treaties between the United States and the foreign countries. Being from Spain, I do a lot of work with the Spanish consulate. I do a lot of E-visas, so I'm going to make a lot of reference to Madrid and the Spanish visas. The first thing you need to look at is whether your particular country has one of these treaties with the United States, and if so, what are the conditions? Because each treaty is completely different, and in many cases there is no treaty. So you start with the treaty. It outlines what the requirements are. But as Congress enacted these laws and these visas, the general characteristics of these visas are that you must be a national of the country with the bilateral treaty. Not a resident, you must have a passport, okay? You need a company to petition for you. It cannot be an individual. So you need to be employed by a company. Again, you have to have the intent, what's called the non-immigrant intent. You must demonstrate that you have some ties with your country that you're going to go back to. Employment, house, rent, family, things of that nature. Another requirement of these visas are that 50% of the company that's petitioning for you must be nationals of the treaty country. So in the case of Spain, the person coming in with a visa has to be a Spanish national, and at least 50% of the owners of the company have to be Spaniards. And you have to document it with passports and different ways of showing this. The good thing about this visa is that even though Madrid is very difficult with these visas, it's very flexible for new businesses coming into the United States to do business. And some consulates are a lot easier than Madrid. Madrid is probably the most difficult one to obtain these visas, but generally they're very good and flexible because there's no limit as to the amount of time that you can renew these visas, and you could be here for a very long time. Generally, they like to give between 2 and 5 years at once at the embassy, but again, once you come to the United States, the person at the border is going to determine how long you can stay. And then it's simply a matter of going back out and coming back in and getting more time on that 5-year visa. The requirements for this visa is that your company must be doing trade between Spain, in this example, your country, and the United States. So whatever your product or services are has to be completed. The business has to be between the two countries. That's the spirit of these visas. And there's all kinds of services and items that would qualify as trade. For example, goods, services, transportation, insurance, data processing. We've done a lot of work for Santander Bank and all the IT people that have come over. Advertising, accounting, design, engineering, technology. This is just a small example. Again, you need to look at the website of the place that you're going to apply for the visa because they all have different requirements. Again, the next requirement is that 50% of the trade of that company has to be with the U.S. So if you open a company here, 50% of the owners in the foreign country have to be Spanish in this case, and when they do business here, for example, a lot of people like to have a corporation in the United States to do business with Latin America. They have their headquarters in Miami, for example, and they're doing business with Latin America, not with the U.S. That would disqualify them for this. You need to show contracts and business with American companies. And the people that can come in with these visas are the executives, the managers, and essential employees. Executives and managers are, self-defined, but essential employees are people that have intricate knowledge of your services or goods, which are essential for you to be able to carry out your business, whatever that may be, in the United States. You cannot bring any other types of workers who are not essential or managers or executives. And they like very much if you hire American workers as part of your staff here. Okay, the second type of e-visa is called a treaty investor. This is really a visa designed for startups, and a lot of the requirements are the same as the E1 visa. You need a treaty and the same non-immigrant intent. But on this occasion, what they look at is investment in the United States. They want to see that you're going to open a company in the United States. It does not have to be, you do not have to be sponsored by a Spanish company. I always use Spain. I know some people are from different countries, but you can self-petition. So if it's a company of only one person, you can petition for yourself. Your company does not have to petition for you. You need to show that your company is active. There has to be some business. You cannot come with just a prospective idea of starting something in the United States. You need to have something that's already ongoing, contracts or any type of notion that you can demonstrate active commercial business. The amount of the investment is relative to what you're going to do. One company might require $30,000, another one might require $250,000. You need to have a very good business plan. They like to see a 5-year business plan with all the numbers. They need to show, you need to show the funds in your bank account either transferred already to the United States or available for transfer. They want to see that you're going to expand job opportunities. And they might give you a short-term visa to see if you actually realize what you set out to do. And then when you go to renew the visa, you would have to show, we opened an office here in Boston, we hired 3 American workers, what have you. We have 10 contracts. You have to have a successful business. You cannot simply invest to pay your salary and your living expenses. That is not sufficient for this type of visa. It has to generate business. So if you're simply generating your living wages, you're not going to be approved. Okay. All right, the next one is the H-1B specialty occupations. These are very popular now because this is what we call H-1B season. These are visas that are for people whose job requires at least a college degree to perform the job. And the reason I'm saying it's H-1B season, it's because these visas are issued in October, which is when the fiscal year comes out. And you can apply for these visas 6 months in advance or April 1st. So all of the applications for these visas have already been submitted. They're in process. Some people already have notices that their cases are in process. So the requirement for these visas is that your job, whatever your job is, must require a college degree in the field where you're going to be working in. So if you're going to be working in computer science as a programmer, the government has conducted studies all over the United States. For example, they've conducted studies here in Cambridge, in Chelsea, in Boston, and Roxbury. And every region of the United States has its own study. And what they study is the job requirements, salary, education requirements for each type of position. And wherever you work, your background must fit within those requirements. So, for example, if in Roxbury, the position you're going for, the salary is $45,000, you can, but you're going to be working in Cambridge. The salaries in Cambridge are much more competitive. Maybe it's $80,000. So your employer has to guarantee that they're going to pay you the salary for the region where you're going to be working at. And the way that is, we find out what those terms are, is first we go to the Department of Labor and get a certification that your particular salary and requirements meets that region's requirements. A lot of people online here. Okay, so the problem with these visas is that the United States wants to have a brain trust here with the brightest brains in the world, but they make it very difficult with. Okay, so thank you. They make it very difficult with the immigration system. It's very onerous. For example, these visas, which are excellent visas for people with college degrees, there's only 65,000 a year. And there's an additional 20,000 more for jobs that require master's degrees. The reason people file, and this is H-1B season, is because the first week of April, you can file it as of April 1st. All of the visas are oversubscribed. Each year, there's over 200,000 applications. So they have to have a lottery, and right now what we're receiving is the notices of the cases that were admitted to the lottery. So it doesn't really work well with reality, but this is what we have. So you need to start early with these visas. Early, I mean December or January, putting everything together with your lawyer to make sure if you're going to qualify that you have all the requirements and it's done on time. In March, the Department of Labor is extremely busy with these applications. So if you don't get in on time, you're going to miss the lottery. So it pays to start early. Now, there's H-1Bs also for organizations that are not subject to this numerical cap, and that is for organizations that are nonprofits, higher education colleges, schools, research organizations, government research organizations, some J1 physicians. So those types of works and organizations are not subject to the cap. You can apply as many as you want, and there's no time limitation. So for example, even though all the H-1Bs for 2017 are already in process, we're processing cases for what we call cap-exempt cases right now, nonprofit organizations. Most of these visas, the immediate family members get derivative visas as well, and some allow for employment authorization while they're in the United States, and some do not. H-1s, unfortunately, generally do not allow for the spouses and the kids to work. There's some organizations that are we call them job shops, and basically those are not real businesses as far as having a relationship, employee-employer relationship. These are agencies that basically they're temp agencies or they farm out workers for other agencies. And they've infiltrated the H-1B system, and if you are working with one of those companies, you're really not working with them. They're just finding you an employer. You cannot get a visa through that system. Okay. J1s. These are cultural exchange visas, and generally they're used for professors, research scholars, college students, teachers, foreign doctors, and a lot of other cultural activities. In my presentation today, there's a lot more information for each of these visas, but I'm keeping it focused on the business aspects because otherwise we would never finish. But a lot of these visas can be used for other non-business purposes, sort of like arts and cultural things, and J1 is used a lot for that. These programs have to be funded either by an entity in your foreign country or in the United States. You must be fluent in English, and you must show that you have medical insurance for the duration of your time here. If you're granted one of these visas, your I-94 is going to say DS on it, which means duration of status. And because a lot of these programs do not have finite dates of whatever the activity you're going to be doing, they allow you, just like the student visas, to stay in the United States as long as you are carrying out the activity that you were supposed to do. For example, if you're studying and you keep going for more studies, there's no finite dates. You can just, as long as you keep going to school, you register under SEVIS, and you are appearing in school, you can stay in the United States. One of the problems with this visa is that the purpose of this visa is to learn something in this country and share it with your home country. And for that, they have a restriction. It's called a 212E restriction, which basically means that after your purpose is completed, you have to go back to your country for at least 2 years before you can come back under any circumstance. And there's very few exceptions to get out of that, but there's a waiver, which means a pardon that you can there's different categories for that, but you can get around it in many cases. The ones that have the most difficult time getting around that 212E restriction are physicians. There's also a trainee and internship program as part of the J1, and those also require English language. If you're an intern, you must be enrolled in a foreign school or have graduated within 12 months of coming in, and you're coming in for an internship with a company or an organization for a limited period of time. You can also come in as a trainee, and that is for people that have a foreign degree plus at least 1 year of experience, professional experience in your field, or if you don't have a degree, you need at least 5 years of documented experience. And below you see all the different categories of activities. There's a lot more, but those are the general activities that are allowed for these visas. L1s. These are visas, we call them intercompany exchange visas or transfers, and these are visas for established foreign companies that are opening a U.S. subsidiary and they want to transfer executives, managers, or essential employees, sort of like the e-visas. The good thing about these is that you can, in many cases, you can jump right into a green card, especially if you have an L1A category, which is executives and managers. And the type of green card that you can obtain if you have one of these visas is the one that does not require labor certification, which I'll get into later, which is a major headache. The requirements for these visas are that you must be coming in to do the same exact type of work you were doing in your country. So if you were a manager in France, you have to come in to manage the business here. You must have been working at least 1 year full-time for the foreign company in the foreign country. In other words, no new hires. For new hires, we use the e-visa if it's available for your country. But you need at least 1 year of employment with the foreign company. You need to show that both the foreign parent company and the U.S. subsidiary are doing business. And your salary must be equivalent to U.S.-based salaries. For example, if you come from a country where executives receive a low pay, you cannot receive that same low pay here in the United States. It has to be commensurate with the area where you're working at. So that can be a problem. If you are an executive or a manager and you're opening a new office, you need to have an administrative structure with employees because these visas are not available for one-man operations. In other words, if you're an executive in a company in Portugal and you come into the United States as an executive does not answer phones or talk to clients or send out mail. You need a structure there, and if you don't have that structure, these visas are not going to get approved. That's a problem with new visas, new offices, sorry. A lot of companies come with a B visa, B1 or B2, remember we talked about that at the beginning. They set up the company, and they go back and they get one of these visas. You have to make sure you have the appropriate administrative structure in place to support one of these visas. And like I said, you can self-petition for your green card with no labor certification. I'll get into labor certification in a minute. The other L category is the L1B. These are for key employees with essential knowledge of your product or services in the foreign country who is being transferred to do the same type of work here. Same requirements, 1 year foreign work. Everything is the same as what we just spoke about for the managers and executives, except that you are a person that has knowledge not commonly available, and it is essential for your services or products. Everything else is the same as the L1A. O1As, these are people with extraordinary abilities. This is also used for arts. And I'll give you an example. If it's in the arts, they're looking at people like Phil Collins, people with Grammys, the top of the people in their business. If you're a scientist, they want to see Nobel Prizes, all kinds of international recognition. These are very hard to get, but once you get these visas, the doors are wide open for a green card, and they are some of these people. And this is the one everybody requests all the time. So they're very difficult to document, and if you don't have one of those major awards or recognitions, you can substitute it for 3 of these other items here. If you email me, you don't need to take all the notes. I can send you the PowerPoint later and give you more information about the particular visa you're interested in. Okay, so that was my presentation, brief presentation about non-immigrant visas. Now we're going to talk about green cards or immigrant visas. So a lot of the requirements are the same, but in this case, the benefit is that you can live in the United States forever and eventually become a U.S. citizen if your country allows dual citizenship. And generally for that, you need to be a permanent resident for 5 years. So these green cards are based on 4 general categories: employment, family, diversity, which is a visa lottery, and humanitarian, which we're not going to get into today. Those are cases like asylum. Some cases in deportation have access to green cards that are not available to any other people. There's a lot of humanitarian situations. For example, there's a program for Central America called NICARA. You can get a green card that way. Some battered spouses are able to obtain green cards through those humanitarian programs. There's a whole variety of different programs under the humanitarian system. Most of these immigrant visas require someone to petition for you, a sponsor. If it's a work visa, it's a company. If it's a family visa, it's a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident has to petition for you. You were given a handout at the beginning. It's called the Visa Bulletin. You have this. This is issued by the Department of State. And it comes out every month. And basically what this tells us is there's quotas for the non-immigrant visas. Generally, they issue about 500,000 visas a year, and this visa bulletin tells us who is eligible to receive the visas each month. If you are what's called an immediate relative, and I'm talking about family situations, you are not subject to these restrictions. There's no quotas for immediate relatives. Immediate relatives are people whose petitioner is their spouse, who is a U.S. citizen, or the parent of that U.S. citizen, or the minor child. Minor child is anyone under 21. Everybody else is subject to these quotas, and all the employment visas are subject to these quotas. And I'll explain more of this in a minute. Like I said before, the fiscal year for the federal government is October. That's when all the new visas come out. That's when the next set of visas come out for this. If you apply for one of these visas and your category is oversubscribed, which most of them are, you have to wait until there's visas available. I'll show you briefly how this works. And you can get this online. The Department of State publishes it every month. If you go to page 2, the top part of the document shows you the different family categories. And for example, F1 is the category for unmarried sons and daughters of U.S. citizens. These are people that are over 21. And they issue 23,400 visas a year. If you look at the bottom half of the document, it shows you F1, and it shows you where it says all chargeability areas. That means that for the month of May of 2016, they're issuing visas to the people that applied on November 22nd, 2008. In other words, there's a backlog of 8 years just for these. Yes. But the worst thing is if you're a national of China, India, Mexico, or Philippines, those are countries that have the largest amount of immigrants every year. And what the government decided is that it is not fair to treat nationals of those countries the same as everybody else, because there would not be any visas for anybody else. So they have their own particular quotas, and they go a lot slower, as you can see. For example, Mexico, this year they're issuing visas for people that applied in 1995. Okay? If you go to page 4, you can see the employment-based visas. And I'll get into the different categories in a minute. But when you see the little C there, that means that it's current, there's visas available. So if you apply, you can get it the same year or as soon as your process is completed. But then there's other categories. For example, in the second employment-based category for China, they're working on cases filed on September 1, 2012. That's how this works. It's a little confusing, but every month they publish the new dates. These dates are not exact because it's based on an estimation of all the applications that were submitted and approved and are in the pipeline. That doesn't mean that you're going to wait 8 years just because it says it here, because a lot of the people in front of you may not qualify or they may not apply. And for example, may not qualify is because the company, if you were petitioned by a company, maybe by the time your visa is current, the company is no longer in existence. Or they had economic problems, like in 2008 here, we had a lot of people waiting for years, and the company has to show from the moment they file until the day of admission that they can meet all the requirements, for example, salary. And we had a lot of people waiting since the early 2000s, and finally when they went for their interview in 2010, the company in the last few years with the crisis here were not able to pay that salary, and the visa was denied. And the same thing happens with family relationships. If your petitioner dies or he's no longer your spouse, even though you waited all these years, that visa is gone. Okay? That's how the visa bulletin works. And these are called preference visas. Again, the spouses and minor child, they come in with the principal immigrant, and they get the same types of benefits. Briefly on the family base, I'll say that U.S. citizens, they can petition, these are the immediate relatives, they have no quotas, they can petition for their spouse, parents, and children under 21, so long as the children are not married. We have situations where children were married maybe when they were 18, then the visa becomes available, so they get divorced. Well, when you go to the interview, the consulate is going to research the records, and they're going to find that you were divorced and you will no longer qualify. LPRs, legal permanent residents, they can also petition for their spouses, minor children, and unmarried sons and daughters, but all of their family members are coming to that quota system, the preference system that we talked about before, so everybody has to wait. Again, you have to establish the relationship from the moment you file until your case is completed. Adjustment of status means that you are in the United States when this process happens, and you can process your case without leaving the United States with USCIS. The other method is if you're in a foreign country, you have to process through the embassy. And to be able to adjust your status, you have to have been your entire time in the United States in status, some sort of status. There's a few exceptions and some waivers that allow us to fix problems, but basically you have to be in status the entire time. They give 226,000 visas per year, plus any that were not used in the prior year, but that never happens. Okay, employment-based green cards, they only issue 140,000 of these per year, and a company has to petition for you. The best one is the EB1 category, employment-based one. They only give 28.6% of those 140,000 a year, and these are the people that qualify for the O1 visas and the L1 visas and some of those E2s. Multinational executives, managers, and the reason this category is good is because you do not have to go through the labor certification process. The next category is the EB2. These are people with advanced degrees, masters, PhDs, and people with exceptional ability in their field. This does require labor certification, and I'll tell you briefly what that is. The Department of Labor wants to protect U.S. workers from unfair intervention from foreign workers working with conditions that are less than the standard in the particular region where you're going to be working at. So they've conducted all these studies, and in order to get a green card based on an EB2 or an EB3 category, first you have to be approved by the Department of Labor, and that requires a process which lasts minimum 6 months and usually at least a year, whereby you have to advertise the position in certain places, and you have to show that there are no qualified U.S. workers for that position. If there are any qualified workers that apply for that position, you must interview them and have a valid reason for not hiring them. If you do not interview them, just interviewing them, or if you do not hire them for a valid reason, your labor certification will be denied. But that's not where it stops. Even typographical errors can be sufficient to deny one of these cases. So it's very onerous, it's unfortunate, but it's designed to protect American jobs. Then people, EB3 are people without masters or PhDs, where your job requires a bachelor's degree, for example. And then there's other subcategories, skilled workers. They do not require, their position does not require a college degree, for example, cooks, but it does require at least 2 years of experience. And for those, again, you have to do the labor certification. Finally, we're going to talk about the diversity visa, which is the visa lottery. Every year, the Department of State issues 55,000 visas to people that qualify. The Department of State has a special website just for this, and every year the conditions and the time of application are different, so you have to log on to their website to find out first if your country qualifies and then under what conditions. What they do is they grant these visas to what they call underrepresented countries. So they do a study over the past 5 years, and any country that has had a low number of immigrants can participate. Therefore, each year it's going to be different, the countries that qualify. If you get selected in the visa lottery, your family can come in with you, and you either do the adjustment of status in the United States or the consular processing in the consulate. All right, that was the information about the visas that I had for today. Now I'm going to briefly talk about business entities. There's two determining factors when you set up a company. One is liability, legal liability, and the other is taxation. I'm not a tax lawyer, so I always tell clients you need to speak with a tax person, because that is actually, in my opinion, the most important factor in which type of entity you're going to use, the one that works for you. And the options for you are the LLC, limited liability company, a corporation. There's two types, a C corporation or an S corporation. And there's also sole proprietorships, also known as DBAs, doing business as. And those are self-employed people that have no legal entity. The reason you need to speak with a tax professional is because you may be able to cut your taxes in half, defer some taxes, or completely avoid some taxes. The part of the liability, basically, the idea behind that is to separate you, the individual, from the business, so that if there's any debt, lawsuits, liability associated with your business, let's say that you are involved in an environmental business and something goes wrong, they will sue your business if you're properly incorporated, and they cannot go after your personal assets. That's the whole point of this. So there's two angles. I can help you with liability. It's the same protection whether you're an LLC or a corporation, absolutely same protection. The only difference, again, is taxes. So the first thing you need to do is consult, find out what works best for you, and then we can help you with the right entity. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of reminders before we move on to the questions. First of all, like this entire talk is going to be accessible on our website. So if you want to revisit this talk, it's going to be there. And second of all, we're going to have a reception after the question session. There's a very nice catering, so please enjoy and stay. So now you can feel free to have any questions to Javier. I don't know if we have an extra microphone, but I think the space is not too big, so it should be fine. All right, thank you.
And we can do questions in private also if you don't want to ask them publicly.
To be a worker of the company, or can be a founder?
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
Or you can be a founder.
Founder?
Yeah, for L1, L2.
L1, you have to be a manager, an executive, or a special employee. You cannot just be a shareholder. You have to be actively involved in the company. Yes. So you have to be not just an investor, you have to actually work in the company and in one of those positions, and you have to come to the United States to work in the same capacity. So if you were an investor and you were the president and executive, you can get the visa. But if you simply put money into that company and you're not working there, you cannot come in under that visa. You have to work for the company. These are for transferring of employees. Not the shareholders. The question was, sorry, if for the L1 visas are available for the investors in the company. And the answer is, you heard, you cannot just be an investor, you need to be actively employed by the company. Yes?
You said that actually a U.S. citizen can ask for the green card of his parents.
Yes.
So let's say I have a son today, how does he have to be in as American to ask for my green card?
Yes. So when a child petitions for the green card for the parents, the child has to be 21 years old. So you have a long way to go. Yes.
Regarding the H-1B visa, you said that generally family members are not allowed to work.
Yes.
Generally, or are not allowed to.
There's only one category that is allowed, but 90% are not. So, yeah, you would be better off getting another type of visa if possible. Question. Oh, and the question was employment authorization for H people. Yes.
Kind of like a dual question. Let's say that you have an E2. How difficult it is for you to transfer them to an H-1B? Is it like you're currently working for a company, but then the company wants to sponsor you, is it easier to transfer to the H-1B, or is there a kind of like a lock there? And the second one is how easy it is to transfer to another company from an E2 to a different company. Do you have to go back home and then get a new visa, or?
Okay, so he has a two-part question. The first one is, if you have an E2 visa, how difficult is it, or is it impossible to transfer to an H-1B, for example? And the second one is, if you have a visa like an E2, how difficult or possible is it to transfer to another company, and whether you have to go back to your country? Well, the first thing I'm going to tell you is that once you're in the United States, like I said at the beginning, you're under the jurisdiction of USCIS, immigration. And that allows you to do a lot of these transfers inside the United States under a process called change of status. So you could change from an E2 to an H1, or from an E2 to a different E2 employer, all inside the United States without leaving. You just have to be in status, and you have to qualify for that second visa. Okay, so it's not that difficult, so long as your new company or your new visa, you meet all the requirements, and so does your company. And you're not required to transfer or go to an interview in the foreign consulate, and you actually don't even have an interview. And what they do is they give you an approval letter with an I-94, which is the document we were talking about before, which will say this person has been granted an H-1B from today until X date, and you can stay in the United States with that H-1B that entire period of time working for the new company. If you leave during that period of time, you won't be able to come back without going to the foreign consulate and getting a visa put in your passport. So what happens with these change of status, it's a two-part process. We get the case approved in the United States, and we also have the USCIS transfer a copy of the case to your particular consulate, so it's there ready for you when you go for that visa to come back in. Yes?
I think I read in the E2 visa, I don't know if you covered that, but I believe is any of the non-immigrant visas that you presented before less eligible for the green card, if you want to apply them afterwards?
Okay, the question is for the E2 visas, is it any less eligible for a green card, right? Oh, which one? Well, the E2 is a diplomatic visa because it's based on a bilateral treaty, and a lot of people think that you're not eligible to transfer to a green card. That's not the case. You simply have to, with your package for the green card petition, add another step, which is a waiver of your diplomatic rights under that treaty, but we do this all the time. And then less favorable to become a resident, I don't think there's such a thing. It all depends on how you're petitioning for your green card. If it's for family, it doesn't matter. And in certain cases, if you're an immediate relative, even if you've overstayed your visa, we can fix that without even a waiver. So every situation is different, and this is one thing we deal with every day. People call me and they say, well, my friend had the same situation as me, blah, blah, blah. Every case is absolutely different, even if you work for the same company or what have you. There's something different about every case. Or they might be completely identical, and we'll submit two the same day, and the worker that gets the cases will work on yours on Friday and leave the other one for Monday, and over the weekend he had a fight with his wife, so he's going to take it out on your case. Or maybe somebody else works on the other case. So every situation is completely different. You can never base your situation on what happened to somebody else. How likely is it to get the diversity visa? Yeah, it's difficult. But, you know, I don't know what's going on over there, but one thing I've noticed is that the majority of the cases that we've handled, everybody had at least a bachelor's degree. I've been doing this almost 25 years. I've never seen a diversity visa for people that do not have a college degree. I don't know. Yes?
can I know how long that time
Okay. So the question is for EB2 visa, if I'm in that process, can I travel? And this answer applies to all of the green card processes. If you're in status, and let's say, for example, you have an E2 visa, and your status is going to end in April 30th, but you file for your green card today, even though your process is going to take 5 to 9 months, you can still stay in the United States, and you're not out of status because you filed before your last visa expired. And as an added benefit, you can request what's called a travel permit, so that while your green card is pending, you can use this travel permit to travel. You just have to make sure you come back for your interview. All right? So that's a travel permit. And they're usually good for a year, but immigration is very effective now, and most green card processes take about 6 months once your visa is ready. Yes?
In Spanish, do you recommend to be a U.S. citizen, having the permanent green card? Is it useful to have both citizens?
The question is, do I recommend to have dual citizenship if you have a green card? Well, it depends, because some countries make you renounce like Germany, you have to renounce German citizenship to become a U.S. citizen. So the first thing you need to check is, are you going to be okay with your country? And Spain, I think you're fine, yeah. And the thing about, it used to be that when you were a permanent resident, you had different tax treatment, but now, whether you're a resident or a U.S. citizen, the IRS can tax you on your income worldwide, so it doesn't make a difference. The good thing is that if you end up hostage in some situation, the U.S. Marines will go rescue you as a citizen, but not as a legal permanent resident. You need to check first with your country, see if there's a problem. In Spain, it's not a problem, and it's a good thing to have. So you can save some money too. For example, if you are going to a country that requires you to pay a visa fee, you come in with the national passport of that country, you save that fee, and then when you come to the United States, you come with your American passport. So it's handy. Okay, more questions? Yes.
Well, thank you for the talk. I wanted to ask, when is a good moment to apply for the green card, and what is the time frame usually?
Okay, the question is, when is a good time to apply for the green card, and what is the time frame? Let me ask you a question. Is it based on work or family?
Work.
Okay, work. And is it one of the cases that requires a labor certification?
I have an H1.
You have an H1B? Okay, so most likely you are going to need a labor certification to make sure that you're not displacing a qualified American worker. What people like to do, and I don't know if it's because of the employer or what, they like to wait till the very last year of the H1B. And usually H1s, you get a visa for 3 years and extended for 3 more years. If there's a problem with your labor certification and you need to do it again and you run out of time, you have to go back to your country and wait for that process to go through. So what I tell people is that as soon as you get your H1, start working on this process. A lot of employers, both for the H visas and the labor certification, the employer has to pay for the entire process, the lawyer and the government fees, and that has to be demonstrated. So a lot of employers don't like to do this unless they have to, and they wait till the very end. But if you run out of time with your labor certification, you might have to go back to your country for a period of time. It's true that your H1 can be extended indefinitely if your labor certification is in process and you did everything on time, but they give you very short margins for filing and to process the case. And if you don't do it on time, after that 6 year, you have to go back to your country. So for you, with an H1, the sooner the better. And how long does it take? Well, let's see. you are going to be the employment-based category 3. And right now they're working on cases filed in February of this year, so it's not going to take that long, less than a year. You're welcome. More questions? Yes?
So if you apply for a green card, or you relative apply for a green card with your spouse, you said that it could take a couple of years, having a look here. What happened meanwhile?
Okay, so I'm assuming that the spouse is a legal permanent resident? Yeah, because if your spouse is a citizen, you don't have to wait. Okay, so what happens? Well, if you are in the United States, you have to be in status, or you have an out-of-status problem, and you'll need a waiver to pardon that. And a waiver is not easy to obtain. You have to demonstrate extreme hardship to your family member. And depending on the situation of your family, it might be easier to prove or not. And if you are in the foreign country, you just have to wait. Okay? Did I answer your question? Okay. Okay.
How do you demonstrate like experience? For instance, I am in the process of J1 and I don't have a college degree. But I have 7 years of experience, but I want to move to an H1B.
Yes.
Do I need to do it?
So the question is, how do you demonstrate experience when you don't have a college degree? Because in some cases, for some of the visas, you can replace the college degree with a certain amount of experience. They're all different in that respect. Well, you can demonstrate it with employment records, tax filings, letters of employers, things that the government can rely on. Oh, absolutely. You have to show that you qualify and you have the experience if you don't have the degree. And there's companies that we use to certify. If you have a foreign degree, it has to be certified to the equivalency of a U.S. degree. And if you have experience, we can use your experience with these companies, and they'll certify that it's equivalent to X amount of college education, for example. So that's the way to do it. All right. Okay.
Well, thank you. Please feel free to approach Javier now. We have a reception. I didn't want to say it, but we also have a Spanish ham. So please feel free to go for it. Thank you all. Thank you, Javier.